After dinner, my daughter-in-law slipped an envelope across the table toward me. Her words dripped with venom. "Since you are too blind to see the truth yourself, here are photographs of me with your husband." But what she did not realize was that I had been preparing for this moment for months. Without hesitation, I calmly reached for my phone, ready to reveal what I had hidden. The envelope landed with a quiet thump in the middle of the table, right between the bowl of mashed potatoes and the green bean casserole. For nearly 4 decades, Sunday dinner at our home had been sacred. All of us gathered around the same polished mahogany table that Victor and I had purchased 38 years ago, when we first stepped into this house. But tonight the familiar ritual carried a charge in the air, sharp, dangerous, and humming like static before a storm. Tessa sat directly across from me, her manicured nails lightly tapping the rim of her wine glass. Throughout the meal she had been uncharacteristically silent, which should have been my warning sign. She was never one to keep quiet. Normally she filled the room with constant commentary, criticizing the food, pointing out flaws in the house, or offering unwelcome advice on how things ought to be done. But tonight she simply sat there with that sly, curling smile tugging at her lips. "What is this supposed to be?" I asked, eyeing the envelope beside my plate. "Open it," she commanded, her tone strangely cold, clipped and calculating. Her words stung. "Since you are too oblivious to notice what is happening under your own roof." My son Caleb glanced up from his plate, his brow furrowed in confusion. "Tessa, what are you doing?" he asked, voice strained. Victor shifted uncomfortably beside me, his fork clattering against porcelain as his hand shook. From the corner of my eye, I noticed his complexion turn pale, his grip trembling as he lifted his glass of water. "Go on, Nora," Tessa pressed, leaning back in her chair as though she were settling in to watch a show unfold. "Open it. Discover what your beloved husband has been busy with while you've been so busy playing the role of perfect little wife." The chill of her words seeped into me, yet outwardly I kept my expression composed, curious even. Inside my heart pounded, but not from shock. No, it was anticipation. I had been waiting for this very evening for 3 long months. 3 months of acting oblivious. 3 months of smiling politely through dinners while the two of them imagined themselves clever. With steady hands I slid open the envelope and pulled out the contents. Glossy photographs spilled onto the table. Each one was sharp, merciless, and impossible to dismiss. Victor with Tessa in our guest bedroom. Victor with Tessa in what was clearly a hotel room. Victor and Tessa kissing inside his car, passion on full display. A carefully measured gasp escaped me as I covered my mouth. "Oh my God," I whispered, my voice cracking just enough to sound believable. "Victor, how could you?" The scrape of Caleb's chair against the hardwood floor rang through the room as he bolted upright. "What the hell is going on?" he demanded. Victor finally lifted his eyes to mine. And then I saw guilt. But alongside it, unmistakable fear. Good. Fear was what I wanted. "Nora, I can explain," he started, but Tessa cut him off with a sharp laugh. "Explain what?" she said breezily, taking a sip of her wine as if she were discussing nothing more than the weather. "Your father and I are in love. We have been for months, and it is time the truth came out." Silence pressed against the walls like a suffocating weight. Caleb stared at his wife, disbelief etched into every line of his face. Victor looked small, like he might sink straight into the floor. And I continued my role flawlessly. Devastated wife with her world crumbling. "I cannot understand this," Caleb said hollowly. "Tessa, you are my wife. Dad, she is your daughter-in-law. This is sick." Tessa shrugged, her face devoid of remorse. "Things like this happen, Caleb. Your father awakened something in me that you never could." I watched as my son's face shattered, his heart breaking right there in front of me. Rage simmered inside me, deep and burning, but I buried it. Not yet. The time would come. "How long?" I asked quietly, though my voice carried steel beneath the softness. 6 months, Tessa answered, her lips curving with satisfaction. "Perhaps longer. When you are truly happy, time tends to blur." She was lying. I knew full well it had been closer to 8 months. I had tracked them almost from the start. Victor was never skilled at hiding secrets. The late nights, the cologne he had never worn before, the sudden interest in exercise at 65 years old. And Tessa? She believed herself sharper than everyone else, but her arrogance betrayed her. I feel sick, I murmured, standing slowly. I need some air. Mom, Caleb began, reaching toward me. I waved him off with a trembling hand. Just give me a moment. I need to process this. My footsteps faltered as I moved toward the kitchen, legs shaking, but instead of heading outside, I stopped just beyond the doorway, close enough to hear but hidden from sight. This was the moment when people exposed themselves when they thought the injured party had left. You didn't have to be so cruel, Caleb's voice broke with grief. Oh please, Tessa scoffed. Your mother needed the truth. She has been parading around for months pretending everything was fine while her husband was falling for someone else. I actually did her a favor. A favor? Caleb's voice cracked. You just destroyed my parents' marriage. You destroyed ours. Your parents' marriage was long dead, Tessa replied flatly. And ours? It was never real to begin with. I heard Victor clear his throat nervously. Tessa, maybe we should. Should what? She snapped, her voice sharp. Pretend none of this ever happened? We agreed, Victor. It is time to stop hiding. I am tired of sneaking around like some common. You are common, Caleb cut in, his words hard and precise. A surge of pride swelled in me for my son's courage. Tessa's tone dropped. Dangerous now. Careful how you speak to me. Do not forget I have more photographs. Ones that might greatly interest your business associates. Victor has already told me about those shady deals you have been making. Her threat struck me like ice down my spine. She was not only betraying me, she was blackmailing my son. That shifted everything. Silently, I drew out my phone and opened the folder marked insurance. 3 months of patience, 3 months of careful documentation, 3 months of setting the trap. At last the time had come. I took a steadying breath, stepped back into the dining room, and faced them all. Victor looked terrified, Caleb broken, and Tessa wore her usual smug little smile. You know what, Tessa? My voice came out steady, no longer shaky with false sorrow. You are absolutely right. I have been blind. I should have noticed what was happening under my own roof. Her lips curved wider, smugness radiating. Finally, some honesty, she replied. Yes, I said evenly, pulling my phone from my pocket. Finally. Turning the screen toward her, I added, Tell me, is this honest enough for you? The blood drained from her face as her eyes locked on the glowing image. It was not Victor and her in this photograph, but Tessa with a stranger, a man I had never met. They were in the same hotel room that appeared in her damning pictures. But this time the date proved the shot was taken only 2 weeks earlier. What is this? She stammered, but her voice faltered halfway. His name is Adrian, I said evenly, my tone calm and deliberate. Adrian Holt. Does that name sound familiar? Her fingers went slack. The wine glass slipped from her grip and shattered against the hardwood. Scarlet liquid seeping into the pale wood grain like spreading blood. That cannot be true, she whispered. Can it not? I pressed, scrolling to the next image. Because according to my research, Adrian Holt is not a stranger at all. He is your husband. Your real husband. The man you married in Nevada 3 years ago. The same man you conveniently told everyone had died. Her world cracked like glass struck by a hammer. I saw the panic overwhelm her. Eyes rolling back, body swaying, and then collapsing onto the floor in a heap. She fainted, crumpled and helpless. For the first time in months, a wave of pure satisfaction rippled through me. This was only the beginning. 3 months earlier, I had been folding laundry in the master bedroom when Victor's phone buzzed on the nightstand. He was in the shower, and normally I never paid attention to his notifications. But that day something drew my eyes toward the screen. What I read there made my heart lurch. Can't wait to feel you inside me again. 42 years of marriage, and this was how betrayal revealed itself. Not through suspicion or confrontation, but in one careless message arriving at the wrong moment. I set down the towel in my hands, my fingers trembling violently. There was only one person in our lives with that initial who would dare send such a message, Tessa. My daughter-in-law. For 2 years she had sat at my dining table, eating my food, smiling politely as if she belonged. all while secretly dismantling my family. I sank down onto the edge of the bed, thoughts spinning. How long had this been happening? How many dinners had I hosted while their eyes locked across the table in silent collusion? How many times had she walked through my front door as both guest and betrayer? The shower was still running when the phone buzzed again. "Victor, you left your phone." I called, my voice remarkably steady. "I will just leave it here." But instead of putting it down, I picked it up. Victor had never been clever with technology. His password was still the same anniversary date we had used for years. My fingers tapped it in 08/15/1981. The screen unlocked without hesitation. The messages nearly made me sick. Months of conversations. Explicit photographs. Detailed plans for hotel meetings. Even worse were their private jokes about me. Complaints that I was old, predictable, boring. But one detail caught my eye above all the others. A screenshot Tessa had sent Victor. A marriage certificate. Something about it seemed off. The text was grainy, the fonts slightly mismatched. I zoomed in, suspicion sparking, and saved a screenshot before Victor could step out of the shower. The following morning, with Victor off at his golf game and Caleb at work, I found myself alone with Tessa for the first time since uncovering the truth. She stopped by to return a few borrowed books, moving around my kitchen like she owned it. "Coffee?" I offered, forcing a smile. "Sure," she said absently, scrolling on her phone. "Make it strong." I hardly slept. "I bet you didn't," I thought grimly, though I kept my smile warm. "Oh? Is something wrong?" She glanced up, and for a flicker of a second I saw something flash across her face. Was it guilt or calculation? "Just thinking," she said vaguely. "You know how it is." No, I did not know how it was to betray the very person who had welcomed me. But I nodded anyway, sliding the mug across the counter. "Tessa," I said lightly. "I was going through family albums the other day and realized something. We have no pictures from your first wedding to Adrian." The ceramic cup slipped from her fingers and smashed on the floor, steaming coffee spraying across the tiles. Sorry I am clumsy today," she muttered quickly, crouching to pick up the pieces. But in that split second before it fell, I had already seen it, the raw, unguarded terror in her eyes. "Do not worry," I said gently, grabbing paper towels. "Accidents happen. But about those photographs. Adrian died in a car crash," she blurted too fast. "It is too painful to look at old pictures of him." "Of course," I said, softening my voice. "I am sorry to have reminded you." Outwardly I comforted her, but inwardly my mind churned. Tessa's history had always felt incomplete, as though she had appeared in Caleb's life out of thin air. I had once explained it away as grief, but now I suspected there was more. That afternoon I did something I had never once imagined I would do. I hired a private investigator. Owen Navarro came recommended, a quiet man with a tidy office and a leather-bound notebook. He listened carefully as I laid out the situation, noting every detail with patient precision. "And what exactly are you hoping to discover, Mrs. Whitfield?" he asked when I finished. "The truth," I answered simply. "The truth about who Tessa really is, and whether Adrian Holt is truly dead." 3 weeks later, Owen called me in. His face was grim as he slid a thick folder across the desk. "Mrs. Whitfield," he said quietly, "these are my preliminary findings." "I think you need to see this," Owen said, sliding the folder across the desk. Inside were photographs, official documents, and carefully organized printouts that painted a picture I could barely comprehend. Adrian Holt was not dead at all. He was alive and living in Phoenix, Arizona. According to marriage certificates Owen had pulled, he was also still legally bound to Tessa. "She's a bigamist," Owen explained, tapping the papers with his pen. "She married your son while still married to Mr. Holt. But that isn't the worst of it." He turned a page, revealing bank statements and credit reports. "She's done this before," he continued grimly. "At least twice that I can confirm. Her pattern is clear. She selects older men, often wealthy and married, seduces them, and then vanishes after draining what she can. Mr. Holt lost his home, his savings, and even his business because of her." I stared at the damning evidence, nausea creeping through me. She's a con artist. A skilled one, Owen said firmly. She changes her name, reinvents her story, tweaks her appearance slightly each time, but she always uses variations of the same alias, Mila Maya Tessa. And without fail, she claims to be a widow. What about Victor? I whispered, my throat tight. My husband, is he just another target? Owen hesitated before answering. I believe it began that way. But from my research, she's been preparing something larger, something that involves your entire family. She's been gathering information on your son's business, your financial assets, even your property holdings. My fists clenched against the arms of the chair. She wasn't only dismantling my marriage, she intended to dismantle our entire legacy. There's more, Owen added quietly. Mr. Holt has been trying to locate her. He wants to press charges for fraud and theft. And there are other victims as well, men willing to testify if it comes to trial. I glanced down at the photographs of Adrian Holt. He was younger than Victor, perhaps in his 50s, his gray-streaked hair framing eyes that looked kind, though weighed down by betrayal. In one picture, he clutched an old photograph of Tessa, where she looked softer, less cunning. Can you arrange a meeting? I asked suddenly. Owen raised an eyebrow. With Mr. Holt? Yes. I think he and I need to talk.
Understand. Understand.
2 days later, I sat in a quiet downtown coffee shop, waiting for a man I had never met, but who could expose the true nature of my daughter-in-law. When Adrian Holt walked in, I knew him instantly from the photos. What struck me most was not recognition but the heaviness in his demeanor, the weariness of a man betrayed and left hollow. Mrs. Whitfield, he said cautiously as he approached. Please call me Nora, I replied, rising to shake his hand. Thank you for coming. As we settled at the table, I studied his face. There was kindness there, deep pain, and if I wasn't mistaken, a fragile thread of hope. I have to ask, Adrian began once our coffee arrived. Is she calling herself Tessa now? Tessa Holt Whitfield, I confirmed grimly. She married my son 2 years ago. His expression crumpled. She's married again. Of course she is, Mr. Holt, I said gently. Tell me everything. What she did to you. Who she really is. For the next 2 hours, Adrian unfolded his story. He described how she swept into his life 5 years earlier, using the name Maya. She claimed to be a widow. She was affectionate, attentive, perfect. He fell under her spell completely. She drained everything, he said hoarsely. My house, my savings, my business. Even my mother's jewelry. Family heirlooms passed down through generations. And then one morning she was gone. No note. Nothing. Did you go to the police? I asked. I tried. But she was clever. Everything she took, she had manipulated me into giving, joint accounts, signed property transfers, so-called gifts. Legally, it was airtight. The police dismissed it as a civil issue. I reached across the table, laying my hand on his. What if I told you we might be able to stop her together? For the first time, his eyes flickered with something more than grief. What exactly do you have in mind? As I laid out my plan, I saw a spark return to Adrian's gaze. And for the first time since uncovering Victor's betrayal, I felt not despair but strength. I was no longer powerless.
Understand.
The morning after meeting Adrian, I awoke with clarity. For months I had drifted between pain and anger, but now I had direction. Not only would I expose Tessa, I would uncover how far her deception stretched, and determine how deeply Victor was entangled in it. I found him in the kitchen, seated with his newspaper and morning coffee. He looked calm, but I noticed the subtle tension in his shoulders, the faint tremor in his hand as he lifted the cup. Good. Let him be nervous. Victor, I said as I poured my own coffee, my voice deliberate and measured. We need to talk. His eyes flicked up, panic flashing before he masked it with feigned confusion. About what, dear? About Tessa. The newspaper crinkled sharply under his tightening grip. What about her? I sat opposite him, studying every flicker of his expression. How long have you known her real name isn't Tessa Holt? The color drained from his face instantly. The newspaper slipped from his hands, pages scattering across the table. I don't know what you mean, he said, but his tone was thin and unconvincing. Her real name is Mila Navarro, I continued evenly. Before that, Maya Dorsey. And legally, on her marriage certificate, she is Catherine Margaret Pike, the wife of Adrian Holt. His mouth opened and closed like a fish gasping for breath. You knew, I said, my voice low and unwavering. You knew she was married to someone else, and you knew she was lying. Victor buried his face in his hands. It's not what you think. Then tell me what it is. For a long stretch, the only sound in the kitchen was the tick of the grandfather clock in the hall. Finally, Victor lifted his head. In his eyes I saw something unfamiliar, real fear. She's blackmailing me, he whispered. The words knocked the breath out of me. What? 3 months ago, he admitted, his voice shaking. She confronted me with photographs. Not of us together. Photos from 20 years ago. The Henderson deal. The name jolted my memory. A property development Victor had been tied to when Caleb was in college. I had never paid much attention back then, trusting Victor to handle his business while I focused on our son. What about it? I asked cautiously, though the pieces were already falling into place. There were irregularities, he muttered. Papers filed incorrectly. Inspections rushed through. Everyone knew, city officials included. That was just how business was done back then. But it wasn't legal. No, I said quietly, not legal. If it came out now, under today's regulations, I could be charged. Fraud, bribery, maybe even racketeering if they wanted to make an example of me. I felt the ground shift beneath my feet. How does Tessa know about this? Victor let out a bitter laugh. She seduced one of the men who worked on that project, Grant Navarro. He kept copies of everything, Victor confessed. When Grant Navarro died last year, she inherited all of his files. She knew exactly what she had. So she came to you, I said flatly. He nodded miserably. She promised to keep quiet about the Henderson deal if I helped her get close to Caleb. She wanted to marry into our family, gain access to our money, our connections. She said it would be temporary, that she'd disappear after a year or two with enough to start over. And you agreed. I whispered, disgust curling in my stomach. What choice did I have? Victor's voice cracked. If those files ever came out, I'd lose everything. The business, the house, our reputation. You and Caleb would be dragged down with me. I stared at the man I had shared over 40 years with and realized, for the first time, that I had never truly known him. So you sacrificed our son's happiness to protect yourself. To protect all of us, he argued desperately. I thought I could manage it, keep her satisfied with a little money, some jewelry. I never meant for things to go so far. So far meaning your affair, I shot back. He flinched as if I had struck him. That wasn't part of the plan. She seduced me, Nora. She made me feel alive again. Desired. I know how pitiful it sounds, but it's the truth. When did you realize she wanted more than trinkets? A month ago, he admitted. She began asking about Caleb's business, about our investments, the house. She wanted me to convince Caleb to make her his partner. He shook his head. That's when I knew I was drowning. Cold rage surged through me. And you said nothing. You were willing to let her wreck Caleb's life just to save yourself. I was trying to figure out how to stop her, Victor insisted, his voice breaking. I swear I was. The only solution you looked for was in her bed, I said icily. At that, Victor collapsed into sobs, his shoulders shaking like a child's. I'm sorry, Nora. I never meant for any of this. I watched him cry and I felt absolutely nothing. No pity. No comfort. Just clarity. A razor-sharp sense of what needed to happen next. Victor, I said calmly, you're going to help me stop her. His tear-filled eyes lifted toward me. What? You heard me. You're going to help me expose Tessa for who she really is, and you're going to protect Caleb. I can't, he choked out. If she releases those documents. She won't release anything. I cut him off. By the time I'm finished, she'll have far bigger problems to worry about. He stared at me like I was a stranger. What are you planning? I stood, dumping my untouched coffee into the sink. What I should have done the moment I learned of your affair. I'm taking control. Nora, please, Victor begged. You don't understand. She isn't just some cheating wife or a gold digger. She's a professional con artist. She's destroyed other families. If you cross her. If I cross her, what? I snapped, turning to face him. Whatever he saw in my expression made him shrink back. She'll destroy me? Victor, she already has. She's taken my husband, manipulated my son, and made my family her playground. What exactly do I still have to lose? Your freedom, he said quietly. If you do something illegal. I'm not going to do anything illegal, I said evenly. I'm going to do something far worse. I'm going to tell the truth. Before he could respond, my phone rang. The caller ID flashed Owen Navarro's number. Mrs. Whitfield, Owen said when I answered, his tone urgent. I have news about Miss Pike, and I think you'll want to hear this in person. An hour later, I sat in Owen's office while he spread a fresh stack of documents across his desk. Victor had begged to come along, but I refused. This was my fight, and I would face it on my own terms. What did you find? I asked. More victims, Owen said grimly. Far more than we first suspected. I've been coordinating with law enforcement in 3 states. It turns out Miss Pike has been running this con for nearly 10 years. The pattern is always the same: wealthy, older, married men. She seduces them, then uses blackmail and manipulation to take control of their finances. How many men? I pressed, bracing myself. At least 8 that we can verify, Owen said. Possibly more. And the total losses? Millions of dollars. The words hollowed me out. What happened to the others? 2 took their own lives, Owen said quietly. The rest lost everything. Their homes, their families, their businesses. She's meticulous about ensuring the legal responsibility lands on her victims, not on her. But you said law enforcement is involved now. They are. The FBI has been building a case against her for a year. But she's careful. They need something undeniable, something that connects all her aliases and proves criminal intent. What kind of evidence? Owen leaned forward. A confession. From her. To someone she trusts. Someone she believes is safe. I knew instantly what he meant. You want me to wear a wire. The agents believe you're in the best position, Owen confirmed. You're the one person who knows her real identity. To her, you're not a potential ally, you're a threat to eliminate. If you can get her to talk about her past schemes, she'll incriminate herself. Exactly, he added. But Mrs. Whitfield, I need you to understand. This will be extremely dangerous. If she suspects you, there's no telling how she might react. I thought of Victor's warnings, of the men she had already destroyed, of the 2 who had chosen death over facing her manipulations. I thought of my son, oblivious to the danger at his side. When do we start? I asked firmly. For the first time since we met, Owen smiled. I'll make the call. Driving home that afternoon, my thoughts whirled. For months I had felt powerless, watching my family unravel while pretending everything was normal. But now at last I had a weapon. Tessa thought she was the predator. Tessa believed she was in control, weaving her web, pulling the strings of everyone around her. What she did not realize was that her reign as the puppeteer was about to collapse. The FBI office in downtown Pittsburgh was nothing like I had imagined. Agent Leah Kwan, at least 20 years my junior, carried herself with sharp-eyed precision and a no-nonsense edge that reminded me of myself in my younger days. Back when I believed I could take on the world. Her partner, Agent Aaron Rivera, was older, his hair touched with gray at the temples, his calm demeanor shaped by decades of dealing with complicated, dangerous people. Mrs. Whitfield, Agent Kwan said as she guided me into a modest conference room, I need you to fully understand what we're asking of you, and the risks involved. I sat down in the hard plastic chair, folding my hands in my lap. I understand the risks. What I want to know is this: will this actually stop her? Agent Rivera slid a thick folder across the table. This is everything we have on Catherine Pike, also known as Mila Navarro, Maya Dorsey, and now Tessa Holt. She has been running this con for nearly a decade. Our estimate is close to $3 million stolen. I opened the folder. Page after page revealed photographs of men I had never met, but they all carried the same look: defeated, hollowed, ruined. Some pictures looked like mugshots, others were from funerals. These are her victims? I asked quietly. The ones we can confirm, Agent Kwan replied. She pointed to one page. Peter Langford, age 62. He lost his construction company and took his own life 6 months after she vanished. Aaron Kwan, no relation to me, he lost his family and savings. He's serving time for embezzlement now, because she convinced him to steal from his own company. I turned the page. More faces. More wreckage. How does she keep getting away with this? I asked. She never technically steals, Agent Rivera explained. She manipulates her marks into handing things over willingly. Money, jewelry, property. She opens joint accounts, convinces them to invest. And she always ensures they are complicit in something illegal. That way, they cannot go to law enforcement without exposing themselves. It's exactly what she has done with Victor. Agent Kwan leaned forward. She researches her targets thoroughly. She learns their secrets, their weaknesses, and she exploits them. What makes your case unique, Mrs. Whitfield, is that you discovered her true identity before she finished her con. She doesn't expect resistance from you. That gives us an advantage. What exactly do I need to do? We'll wire you for sound, Agent Rivera said. Nothing visible. You'll need to get her talking about her past cons, her other names, her victims. If she confesses to even one, we can arrest her and begin building a broader case. And how do you suggest I make her confess? You manipulate her, Agent Kwan said simply. You use the same tactics she has used on everyone else. Pretend you admire her. Present yourself as tired of being a housewife, ready to join her in her schemes. Con artists like her can't resist boasting about their brilliance when they think they've found someone who appreciates their cleverness. The plan was simple but dangerous. If Tessa suspected I was working with law enforcement, she might lash out in unpredictable, even violent ways. But as I looked at the photographs of ruined men, of families broken, I knew I had no choice. When do we start? I asked. We'll need a few days, Agent Rivera replied. Time to set up the equipment and train you on exactly what to say. Until then, you must behave as though nothing has changed. Don't give her the slightest reason to doubt you. Pretending normalcy was harder than I expected. That evening, as I prepared dinner for yet another family gathering, I observed Tessa with sharpened eyes. She was good, flawlessly good. She played the role of adoring daughter-in-law with ease, complimenting my roast, asking Victor about his golf scores, smiling warmly as Caleb spoke about his contracts. But now I could see what lay beneath the act. Every question was not idle chatter but reconnaissance. When she inquired about Caleb's latest clients, she was probing for information. When she complimented Victor's new watch, her eyes lingered a little too long, as if cataloging our assets. Mom, you seem distracted tonight, Caleb said during dessert, snapping me out of my study. Just tired, I answered with a gentle smile. It's been a long week. Across the table, Tessa's gaze flickered toward me. For just a moment, something passed through her expression. Was it suspicion, or the worry that her carefully crafted scheme might be slipping? You have been working too hard, she said sweetly, her voice full of false sympathy. Maybe you should take a vacation. Victor was just telling me how much you've always dreamed of going to Europe. I locked eyes with Victor. Were you now? He shifted uncomfortably in his chair. I may have mentioned it. How thoughtful of you both to arrange my life, I said lightly, though I let the faintest trace of steel edge my tone. But I'm perfectly content where I am, thank you. Tessa's smile tightened ever so slightly. Of course. I only thought it might be nice for you to have some time away. Her meaning was clear. She wanted me out of the way. I wondered how many of her other marks had been pushed toward conveniently timed vacations while she executed her thefts. I'll keep that in mind, I replied smoothly. Later, as Caleb said his goodbyes to Victor in the living room, Tessa lingered in the kitchen. Nora, she said, dropping her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. Can I ask you something? Of course, dear. Have you noticed anything different about Victor lately? He seemed stressed. I turned slowly to study her face. Different how? I don't know. Distracted. Preoccupied. I worry about him, you know. Stress at his age can be dangerous. She was fishing. Testing me. Or perhaps laying the groundwork for her next move. Now that you mention it, I said thoughtfully. He has been acting different, I said slowly, letting the words hang in the air. More secretive than usual. I even came across some papers in his office the other day that I didn't recognize. Tessa's eyes sharpened, her interest piqued despite the smile still fixed on her lips. What kind of papers? They looked like legal documents, I replied, pausing deliberately as though uncertain. I didn't study them carefully, but they seemed official. I watched her closely. Her expression didn't shift, but I could practically hear the wheels turning inside her head. Probably nothing, she said quickly, brushing it off. Victor deals with a lot of contracts. I'm sure it was just routine paperwork. You're probably right, I agreed lightly. Then, as though it were an afterthought, I added, although some of them looked very old. Almost 20 years. The pages were yellowed, and the typeface wasn't what you see now. Tessa went very still. How old exactly? She asked, her voice too casual to be real. I couldn't say for sure. Maybe 2 decades. Strange, she muttered, trying and failing to disguise her tension. Before I could press further, Caleb appeared in the doorway. Ready to go, hon? Absolutely, Tessa answered, her mask snapping neatly back into place. Nora, thank you for dinner. Delicious as always. When the front door closed behind them, I found Victor in his study, his eyes vacant as he stared at his computer screen. She's getting nervous, I said, shutting the door. He jerked upright. What do you mean? She was asking about you. Fishing. And she looked very interested when I mentioned finding old legal documents. What old documents? His face twisted in confusion. I made it up, I said impatiently. The point is she believed it. She thinks you might still have records tied to the Henderson deal. Victor paled. If she believes that, I continued, she'll speed up her timeline. Which is exactly what we want. We? Victor asked faintly. Yes, Victor. We. In 3 days I'm going to confront Tessa about who she really is. And when I do, you're going to back me up. Nora, you can't. It's too dangerous. It's more dangerous to let her keep going, I snapped. She isn't planning to just bleed us for money. She's setting Caleb up to be destroyed, the same way she's destroyed every other man before him. If we do nothing, his life will be on our conscience. He was silent for a long while, staring down at his trembling hands. What do you need me to do? He asked finally. When the time comes, I need you to tell Caleb everything, the blackmail, how it began. He must understand this is not his fault. And us. Victor whispered. Our marriage. I studied the man I had once loved, the man who had betrayed me so completely, and felt only emptiness. I don't know. But our marriage is the least of our problems right now. 2 days later, Agent Kwan called. Everything was ready. The recording device was no bigger than a button. Invisible once hidden in my clothing. The agents had also chosen the perfect site for the confrontation. A small downtown cafe where surveillance could blend in among the crowd. Remember, Agent Kwan said as she secured the wire beneath my blouse. Your objective is to get her talking about her previous cons. Ask about the other men, how she persuaded them to hand over money, how she convinced them to trust her. Make her think you admire her skill. And if she doesn't believe I want in? I asked. Then we abort, Agent Rivera said firmly. Your safety comes first. Say the code word and we move immediately. The code word was butterfly, innocuous enough to slip into conversation naturally if things turned bad. Driving to the cafe that afternoon, my fingers shook on the wheel. For 3 months I had played my part, pretending not to know about Victor's affair, pretending to accept Tessa as family. Now I was about to pull the mask off. Yet fear was not what I felt. For the first time since this ordeal began, I felt in control. Tessa was already there when I arrived, seated in the far corner where she could see every entrance and every customer. Dark sunglasses concealed her eyes, though we were indoors. Even in paranoia, she thought she was clever. The cafe was bustling, office workers grabbing late lunches, students tapping away on laptops, an elderly couple sharing cake. No one had any idea they were about to witness the beginning of a takedown. I spotted her instantly. She had chosen her seat wisely, back against the wall, escape routes in sight. But her posture betrayed her. For the first time since I had known her, Tessa looked unsettled. "Thank you for coming," I said as I slid into the chair opposite her. "Your message was cryptic," she replied flatly, skipping over any attempt at warmth. "What's this about, Nora?" I ordered coffee from the waitress, deliberately slow, letting the tension simmer. Somewhere in the cafe, FBI ears were tuned to every word. The tiny microphone against my chest felt impossibly heavy. "It's about Adrian," I said at last. Tessa froze. For a heartbeat, her flawless mask cracked, and terror flickered across her face before she forced it away. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said tightly. "Adrian Holt," I said evenly. "Your husband. Very much alive." Her hand shook as she reached for her glass of water. "Adrian is dead." "No," I said, voice steady as steel. "He isn't. He had been living in Phoenix working construction jobs, and for the past 3 years he had been searching for you." I leaned across the table, lowering my voice to a sharp whisper. Then I spoke her true name, Catherine. The word struck her like a physical blow. She flinched, her sunglasses slipping down her nose far enough for me to see her eyes. They were not the eyes of a calm, composed woman anymore, but of a hunted animal cornered with no escape. She began to speak. "How did you?" but stopped herself before finishing, as though afraid of giving away too much. "It wasn't that difficult once I understood what to search for," I said evenly. "You're skilled, Tessa, but not flawless. You left just enough fragments behind for someone who truly wanted answers." Her gaze darted around the cafe, scanning doors, windows, every possible exit. I could almost hear her calculating escape routes, weighing whether to run or fight. "What do you want from me?" she asked at last, her voice brittle. "To talk. Really talk," I replied. "No more lies. No more clever little games. I already know who you are, what you've done, and what you're planning to do to my family. You don't know anything." In response, I pulled my phone from my bag, scrolling until the photographs appeared. The ones Owen had slipped into my hands. I turned the screen toward her. Peter Langford. He trusted Mila Navarro, who convinced him to embezzle from his company's pension fund. He couldn't face the consequences and ended his own life. I swiped again. Aaron Kwan. Maya Dorsey persuaded him to drain both his retirement savings and his children's college accounts. He is now serving time in prison. Another flick of my finger. Nathaniel Cole. Or rather, Jenna Dorsey's victim. You like that alias, don't you? He mortgaged his house, poured everything into your so-called investment scheme, and died from a heart attack 6 months later after losing it all. Her voice trembled, barely audible. "Stop." "Why should I stop?" I asked coldly. "Because it is unpleasant to confront the wreckage you've left behind? Because pretending they were nothing more than business transactions is easier than admitting you systematically destroyed lives?" For a brief moment, her shoulders sagged. Then Tessa straightened abruptly, forcing her mask of composure back into place. Her eyes hardened as she said, "What do you want, Nora?" "I want in." Whatever answer she had been expecting, it was not that. Her eyes widened in disbelief. "What did you just say?" "I said I want in on whatever scheme you're planning next. I am finished with the role of beautiful wife and flawless mother-in-law. I am done folding laundry and serving dinners while everyone else lives dangerously interesting lives." She studied me as though I had grown an entirely new face. "You cannot be serious." "I am absolutely serious," I answered. "Do you honestly believe I don't know about Victor's countless affairs? Do you think this is the first time he betrayed me? Darling, I have been pretending not to see for 20 years. The only difference now is that I have found someone who might actually be worth paying attention to." "You are insane," she muttered. "Insane? Look at yourself. You have taken millions of dollars from men who thought they were cleverer than you. You've lived a dozen different lives, wearing new faces whenever it suited you. That isn't insanity, it's brilliance." I could see her hesitate, processing, trying to decide if I was laying a trap or speaking truth. "Even if I did believe you," she said carefully, "what makes you think I need a partner?" "Because you are getting careless. I told her bluntly. The Adrian affair, for example. You should have ensured he was actually dead before presenting yourself as a grieving widow. And this mess with Victor and the blackmail. It is reckless and far too complicated. Her eyes narrowed into blades. How do you know about the blackmail? Oh, please. Did you really think Victor could keep something like that hidden? He told me everything, the Henderson deal, your threats, every sordid detail. I leaned back in my chair, studying her. But here's what puzzles me. Why bother with all that effort when simpler ways exist to get what you want? Such as? She challenged. Victor is not the one with the real wealth in this family. I am. That statement caught her attention. She tilted her head, wary now. What do you mean? My father left me a trust fund Victor knows nothing about. $3.2 million untouched, sitting in an account only I can reach. Victor believes his paycheck keeps us afloat, but the truth is I've been subsidizing our lifestyle for years. It was a complete fabrication, of course. No trust fund existed. But I needed her to believe it, to see me not as a bored housewife but as someone holding serious leverage, money that dwarfed her current con. Why are you revealing this to me? She asked suspiciously. Because I want out of this life and you are going to help me. We take the money and vanish. Start fresh in another city, maybe another country. We could even work together on bigger jobs. Imagine it, two grieving women bound by tragedy, building new lives while charming the wealthy and exploiting their greed. Country clubs, charity galas, retirement estates, men with fortunes larger than their common sense. For the first time since I had sat down, genuine interest flickered in her eyes. You're actually serious about this? Dead serious. But before I trust you as a partner, I need proof that you know your craft. Tell me how you convinced all those men to give you their money. And just like that, the walls crumbled. Tessa began to talk, her voice slipping into the cadence of someone proud of their skill. Peter was simple, she said, almost fondly. Recently divorced, desperate for validation. I became the struggling widow, drowning in my late husband's debts. He was desperate to play the hero. I got $400,000 from him. It could have been more, but when his accountant started asking questions, I knew it was time to disappear. And Aaron Kwan? I prompted. Aaron was more challenging. He was married with children, but he hid a gambling problem his wife knew nothing about. I convinced him I had access to insider investments, a way to pay off his debts and secure his family's future. He was so desperate to believe it was possible. Her pride grew with every word as she detailed her strategies. The recorder hidden in my bag captured it all. The names, the sums, the methods, enough to tie her to fraud across multiple states. And Nathaniel Cole? I asked casually. She smiled with satisfaction. Nathaniel was probably my masterpiece. I spent half a year earning his trust, memorizing every detail about his finances, his weaknesses, his family. He believed he was investing in a legitimate real estate development. In truth, the money flowed into offshore accounts I controlled. I began with small amounts, always showing excellent returns. By the time I asked for the big sum, he was convinced of my brilliance and mortgaged his house without hesitation. And then you disappeared, I said. No, she corrected smoothly. I became someone else. That is the beauty, Nora. When one life collapses, you simply begin another. And Adrian? Where does he fit in? Her expression darkened instantly. Adrian was different. He was supposed to be my exit plan, the man I would finally settle with when I retired. But he became suspicious, asked too many questions about my past, about my family. He was getting too close. I realized he was a danger. So yes, I staged my own death. A car accident. I had help, she admitted coolly. Someone owed me a favor. Falsified police reports, planted evidence. As far as the official record shows, Catherine Pike drowned in a Montana lake 3 years ago. But Adrian never believed it, I pressed. She scoffed, dismissive. Adrian is an idiot. He hired private investigators, plastered social media with desperate posts, even had missing person flyers printed. His obsession made it much harder for me to move on to my next opportunity. That opportunity, of course, was Victor, and by extension your family. She corrected herself with a thin smile. Victor was merely the door. The real target was Caleb's business. He has built something substantial, something worth inheriting. He trusts far too easily. With the right persuasion, I could have become his partner. Maybe in time he would have left me the entire company in his will. I steadied my breathing. And me? What role was I supposed to play in all of this? Her lips curled into a reptilian smile. You were meant to be the grieving widow. After Victor's tragic heart attack, naturally. Her words froze me. You were planning to kill Victor. Not kill, she corrected smoothly. Merely assist fate. His blood pressure medication is easily swapped with pills that look identical, but have very different outcomes. For a man his age under stress, such things happen without raising suspicion. My hands tightened into fists beneath the table. She wasn't just a con artist, she was preparing murder. With Victor gone, Caleb would inherit everything, and his dutiful stepmother would be right there to guide him through his grief. A few years later she would control it all. I forced myself to keep the mask on to stay in character. That's actually brilliant. Thank you, she said with a flash of pride. But there's just one flaw in your perfect plan, I countered, sliding my phone across the table. And what would that be? I stopped at the photo that had started this entire confrontation. Adrian Holt alive and well, holding a recent newspaper. You overlook something crucial, I said. She stared at the screen, color draining from her face. That's impossible. No, Catherine. Adrian is very much alive. And so are Peter Langford's children. So is Aaron Kwan's wife. So is Nathaniel Cole's brother. They've all been searching for you. And now they've found you. The cafe door opened at that exact moment. Agent Kwan walked in, followed by Agent Rivera and two more men in dark suits. Tessa's head whipped toward them, and I saw the flash of realization cross her face. You, she spat, rising halfway from her chair. I wouldn't try it, I said evenly. There are agents covering every exit. Her body slumped back into the seat, her breath shallow, eyes darting. You're wearing a wire. I am. And you've just confessed to enough crimes to keep you behind bars for the rest of your life. Agent Kwan stepped forward, badge visible. Catherine Margaret Pike, you are under arrest for fraud, theft, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit murder. As her rights were read aloud, Tessa glared at me with venom in her eyes. This isn't finished. Yes, I said firmly as the cuffs snapped shut around her wrists. It is. But even as I watched them escort her away, I knew the hardest part still loomed ahead. I would need to face Victor. I would need to tell Caleb the truth about the woman he had called his wife. And I would need to find out what pieces of my life could still be salvaged after everything collapsed. The game was over, but the real rebuilding had only begun. 6 months later, I stood in the kitchen of my new apartment, watching the sunrise stain the horizon in strokes of pink and gold. The place was modest compared to the house I once shared with Victor, but it was mine. Every chair, every framed photo, every coffee mug had been chosen by me for me. The divorce had been finalized 3 weeks earlier. Victor had fought at first, pleading for counseling, promising he had changed, swearing that Tessa was a one-time mistake that would never happen again. But I was finished. Finished with excuses, finished with hollow vows, finished with a marriage built on my silence while he indulged himself however he pleased. My phone buzzed against the counter. A message from Caleb. Coffee this afternoon? I have news. Smiling, I typed back, my place or yours? Yours. I like what you've done with it. Through everything, my bond with my son had been the single bright thread. When the truth about Tessa came to light, her lies, her real name, her intentions for both Victor and the business, Caleb had been shattered. Yet instead of turning on me for keeping secrets, he had thanked me for shielding him. I should have seen it, he admitted during one of our long conversations in those early weeks. The warning signs were there, but I wanted to believe I had found someone who loved me. That isn't weakness, I told him gently. That's just being human. She was very skilled at deception. Now, half a year later, he was healing. He had poured himself into expanding his company, taken careful steps back into dating, and begun to hope again. He was stronger than I had ever given him credit for. The doorbell rang at precisely 2 o'clock. When I opened the door, Caleb stood there with a bouquet of sunflowers and a grin that reminded me of the little boy I once tucked into bed. You look happy, he said, kissing my cheek and handing me the flowers. I am happy, I realized, surprised at how true the words were. Genuinely, deeply happy. We carried our coffee out onto my small balcony, pairing it with blueberry scones I had learned to bake in a cooking class the month before. It was just another new thing. Another step in the life I was slowly but surely building for myself. So what's this news you've been holding on to? I asked. Caleb's grin widened until it looked like it could split his face in two. Adrian Holt called me yesterday. I nearly choked on my coffee. Adrian? Why on earth would he call you? He wanted to thank me, Caleb explained. Apparently, with the information gathered after Tessa's arrest, the FBI managed to recover about 60% of what she had stolen from him. He's even getting his house back. That's wonderful, I said, though Caleb's expression told me there was more. That isn't even the best part, he continued. Adrian is starting a support group for people who've been victims of romance scams. He asked if I'd be interested in helping. I set my cup down carefully and studied my son's face. And do you want to? He nodded thoughtfully. I think I do. Feels like maybe something good could come from all this chaos. Maybe we can help others avoid the kind of pain we went through, or at least guide them in healing afterward. I reached across the small table, squeezing his hand. I think that's a beautiful idea. He hesitated, then asked, And what about you, Mom? What will you do with your new life? It was the very question I had been wrestling with for months. For 42 years, my identity had been woven into my roles: Victor's wife, Caleb's mother, the unseen manager of a household that ran smoothly because I made it so. Now at 63, the slate was clean. I could choose to be anything. I've been considering going back to school, I said. Finishing the degree I abandoned when I got married. His eyes lit up. Really? What would you study? Criminal justice, perhaps. Or psychology. After everything that happened with Tessa, I keep thinking about how she was able to manipulate people so easily, how she read their weaknesses as if they were open books. I'd like to understand that more deeply. Caleb lifted his coffee cup in a playful toast. To new beginnings. To new beginnings, I echoed, clinking my cup against his. That evening, after Caleb had gone, I found myself leafing through the old family photo albums I had salvaged from the house. Page after page held snapshots of birthdays, holidays, graduations. In so many of those pictures, I now saw what I had missed at the time: Victor's distance, his wandering eyes, the way his attention was never fully present even when he smiled for the camera. But there were other photographs too. Just Caleb and me. His high school graduation, where Victor had been too busy at work. The day Caleb opened his business, when Victor had forgotten to show up altogether. In those moments, captured forever, I saw something important. I had been a good mother. No matter what else had unraveled, I had raised a kind, honest, hard-working man. That mattered. That was worth everything. The chime of my laptop pulled me from the memories. A new email had arrived from someone I didn't know: Jenna Benton. Mrs. Whitfield, it began. I hope you don't mind me contacting you. Agent Kwan gave me your information. My name is Jenna Benton, and I was married to Nathaniel Cole, one of the men your daughter-in-law defrauded. I wanted to thank you for your courage in exposing her. I read on, my chest tightening with each line. Tom died believing he had failed, that his poor choices had ruined our family's future. He never knew that Catherine Pike was a professional criminal who had done this to many others. Because of your bravery, I've been able to recover some of our money. But more importantly, I've been able to tell our children the truth about their father. He wasn't a fool. He was a victim. That truth has lifted a burden I didn't even know I was carrying. The email explained that several families of Tessa's victims were planning to attend her sentencing hearing the following month, determined to ensure the judge fully understood the devastation she had caused. Would you consider writing a victim impact statement? Jenna asked. I know you weren't defrauded of money like the rest of us, but she destroyed your family too. Your voice matters. I stared at the glowing screen, my thoughts swirling. A victim impact statement. Justice. The strange, unanticipated paths life sometimes carves. A year earlier, I had been a woman who avoided confrontation, who preferred to patch things quietly behind closed doors. Now I was being asked to stand in a courtroom and speak publicly about the darkest year of my life. Once the very idea would have paralyzed me. Now it felt like an opportunity. I began to type my reply. 3 weeks later, I stood outside the federal courthouse in downtown Pittsburgh, dressed in the navy blue suit I had originally purchased for my divorce proceedings. Agent Kwan met me at the entrance. "Are you ready for this?" she asked. "As ready as I'll ever be," I answered. The courtroom was packed. I recognized faces I had only seen in photographs Owen had shown me months earlier. Adrian Holt, healthier now, calmer. Jenna Benton, kind eyes set in a face lined with grief and resilience. Other men and women I assumed were relatives of Tessa's victims. At the defendant's table sat Tessa. Dressed in an orange jumpsuit, her hair pulled back sharply, she looked years older than the polished woman who had once smiled across from me at dinner. When our eyes met, her expression hardened, but she did not look away. One by one, the victims and their families rose to speak. Adrian described the 3 years he had lived believing his wife was dead, the depression that nearly consumed him. Jenna read a letter her youngest daughter had written about losing their home. And Peter Langford's son, Peter Jr., told the court about his father's final months. When my name was finally called, shame and a surge of self-loathing pressed down on me. Yet my legs carried me forward with steady determination. I stepped into the witness stand, clutching the words I had rehearsed dozens of times. But as I looked out at the crowded courtroom, the practiced lines felt hollow. I folded the paper and spoke from my heart instead. "Your Honor," I began. 6 months ago, I believed I knew who I was. I saw myself as a wife, a mother. A woman whose role was to hold her family together by keeping the peace. I thought my duty was to smooth over every problem, to look away when life grew uncomfortable, to protect everyone else's feelings even when it came at the cost of my own. I let my gaze shift toward Tessa, who was staring at me, unblinking, her eyes locked on mine. But the defendant taught me something I had not understood before, though I doubt she ever intended to. She taught me that silence in the face of wrongdoing is not kindness. It is cowardice. She taught me that shielding people from the consequences of their actions doesn't save them. It only enables them. And she taught me that sometimes the most loving act you can give your family is the truth, even when it hurts. I paused, drawing a steadying breath. This woman didn't only steal money from her victims. She stole their trust in themselves, their confidence in their own judgment, their ability to believe in others. She shattered the very idea of love, of loyalty, of family. That damage doesn't appear on a bank ledger, but it is real. It is devastating. Now I look straight into her eyes. But here's what she didn't anticipate. Some of us are stronger than we appear. Some of us will not let her define our lives. Some of us will take the broken pieces she left behind and build something stronger, something better. When I finished, silence hung heavy in the courtroom, broken only by the sound of quiet sobbing from somewhere in the gallery. I returned to my seat, my pulse racing but my conscience finally clear. The judge's ruling was swift. Tessa was sentenced to 15 years in federal prison. As the bailiff escorted her away, she turned for one final glance at me. I met her stare head-on, and for the first time I saw something new in her eyes. Defeat. Outside the courthouse, Jenna Benton approached me. "Thank you," she said softly, "for everything." "And thank you," I replied, "for showing me I wasn't alone in this." That evening I picked up the phone and called Caleb to tell him about the sentencing. Then with trembling hands I dialed my sister in California, a woman I hadn't spoken to in years because Victor always had an excuse why we couldn't visit. This time I made plans to see her the following month. Later, I opened my laptop and began filling out the application for the local community college. It was time to finish what I had abandoned 4 decades ago. As I worked, my mind drifted back to the woman I had been 6 months earlier, the one who feared rocking the boat, who accepted crumbs of affection, who convinced herself that keeping others happy mattered more than her own well-being. That woman felt like a stranger to me now. I thought of Victor too, alone in that oversized house, likely wondering how everything had unraveled. A part of me pitied him, but a larger part felt nothing but gratitude. Because if he hadn't betrayed me, if Tessa hadn't forced my hand, I might have wasted the rest of my years wandering in the fog of a marriage that had died long ago. Tomorrow the sun would rise again, pouring golden light into my small kitchen. And for the first time in decades I would be fully awake to see it, present in my own life, ready for whatever the future brought. At 63 years old, I was finally free. And I intended to make the most of every day still ahead. Now I wonder about you, the one who has listened to my story. What would you do if you were standing in my place? Have you ever lived through something similar? Share your thoughts below. And as always, I've left 2 other stories on the final screen favorites on this channel that are sure to surprise you. Thank you for staying with me until the very end.